The conquest of Song China by the barbarian Mongols was truly one of the great humiliations in Chinese history. Since the time of China's founding with the Xia, the barbarians that lay beyond the fray of Chinese civilization were known as crass, brutish, and uncivilized, while the Chinese had been considered the light-bearers of human civilization and progress. While the northern barbarians had long made incursions into the Chinese frontier and even dominated the north for a time, the entirety of China being conquered and subjugated by a barbarian horde that had held them in contempt for over a century would have seemed as if it was the end of the world. This was the case when the formidable Mongols had completed their 74-year-long conquest of the entirety of China, and for those that lived at such a time, the flame of civilization would have seemed to surely have been extinguished, and who knew if it would ever come back. After a century of Mongol rule, also known as the Yuan Dynasty, the descendants of Kublai Khan's ferocious horde had become accustomed to the decadence they had inherited from their conquered people. As is frequently the case with nomadic groups conquering a settled civilization, the Mongols would assimilate into the conquered people's culture, being profoundly influenced by Confucianism. This led to factional strife in the imperial court, where one faction wanted to continue the old ways of Mongol-style custom and tradition in their rule, while the other group favored a more Sinicized rule of Confucian-based leadership. This ideological schism would divide the Yuan imperial court and eventually lead to a coup d'etat which would destabilize leadership in the domain. The lack of unity in leadership contributed to the Mongol garrisons in China going into steep decline in the 13th century, and over time they increasingly failed to put down local peasant rebellions. This led to an over-reliance on provincial rulers to quell the rebellions, weakening their power base further and decentralizing rule away from the Yuan capital, Kanbalik. In addition to weakening the Yuan military, there were a number of natural disasters including floods, pestilence, epidemics of disease, and numerous rebellions. All this contributed to a growing sense of impending doom amongst the Han population in the declining Yuan dynasty. These sentiments were inflamed by the religious sects preaching of the coming end times, pointing to the death of Han civilization, as well as the numerous tragedies that had beset the nation. As if to be a sign of the manifest will of heaven, the Black Plague swept through in the year 1333, where 13 million people were killed by the disease. These religious sects played an important role during the time of the Yuan dynasty, as they became retainers of ancient Chinese superstition and ethnic nationalism, and thus were driven underground for undermining Yuan authority. The most prominent of these sects was known as the White Lotus Society, a 200-year-old religious cult that preached of the imminent return of their messiah, known as Bodhisattva Maitreya in Buddhist eschatology. Bodhisattva Maitreya was regarded as the future Buddha who would reappear in the world during the end times when all the teaching of the Buddha had been forgotten. The White Lotus Society was a massive religious and cultural phenomenon and a strong proponent of nationalist revivalism. With tens of millions of proponents all across China, rebellions sprung up across the empire like a brush fire, with adherents donning red turbans, leading to the name for the period for which it is known, the Red Turban Rebellion in 1351 AD. With religious fervor running high, a cloth vendor in a crowded Hunan marketplace named Shu Shaohui was recognized by adherents of the White Lotus Society as being the prophesied reincarnated Messiah. Being a divine figure, Red Turbans in Hunan and Hubei flocked to his cult of personality and supported his ascension to emperor. Yet, not all the Red Turbans viewed Shu Shaohui as the return of Buddha. Leading general in the Red Turban Rebellion, Zhu Yuanzhang, rejected Shu Shaohui's claims of divinity and consolidated support from the other Red Turbans residing in Wu. The Red Turbans were then divided into two, with the northern Red Turbans adhering to Shu Shaohui's divinity, and the southern Red Turbans, led by Zhu Yuanzhang, rejecting such a claim. Shu Shaohui's presence wouldn't last, however, as one of his leading generals, Chen Youliang, had had him assassinated due to a perceived threat against his life. and in a fairly bloodless manner, Chen Youliang managed to inherit the kingdom that Shu Shouhui and his Red Turban allies had founded, as well as the spiritual quest to revive the Han Dynasty's long-lost glory. Chen Youliang then coronated himself as emperor a year later, naming his dynasty Da Han, which was a salute to their dynastic progenitors, the Han Dynasty. The southern Red Turbans, meanwhile, led by Zhu Yuanzhang, had formed their own dynasty in parallel to them, which was dubbed as the Ming. The character for Ming pertained to superstitious importance to Zhu Yuanzhang's religious beliefs, Ming meaning new, revival, and wisdom. With the Yuan Dynasty in freefall decline, it no longer posed a serious threat to the upstart dynasties, and it was now a question of who would be the one to take the reins of China's 4,000-year-long legacy. With the Red Turbans principally in the south, the focus of the attention in this conflict between these two powers was the waterways that connected East China to West China, and by the use of the Grand Canal, South China to North China. And so both factions had built up massive armadas that were equipped with, at the time, state-of-the-art gunpowder and flamethrower technology. The key strategic river of importance was the Yangtze, which was the main artery of southern China, with the beating heart of it being the large freshwater lake known as Lake Poyang, controlled by the Ming city of Nanchang, which was strategically positioned to oversee the movement of vessels from many of the smaller rivers that led into the lake. The city became a central point of contest between the two Red Turban factions. The Red Turban forces of Chen Youliang launched a major amphibious assault on the city but were beaten back due to the defenders' use of cannons. In 1363, the commencement of the battle marked what is asserted to be the largest naval conflict in terms of personnel, involving upwards of 850,000 marines and sailors. The Ming forces were estimated to be at 200,000, and the opposing Da Han forces boasted a formidable strength, 650,000 sailors and marines. Zhu Yuanzhang, overseeing key garrisons on the lake from Nanjing, approximately 560 kilometers downriver, encountered a formidable challenge in 1362 when Chen Youliang utilized tower ships to attempt to transport troops over the walls of Nanchang. To defend against this predicament, the defenders destroyed and relocated the wall further from the shore, so the invaders would be unable to disembark on the city walls due to their relocation from the shoreline. When the invaders disembarked on the shoreline to assault the city, they were met with withering cannon fire, resulting in Chen Youliang's forces being repelled. Following this setback, Chen Youliang initiated a blockade to starve out the defenders and take the city through a naval siege. But in the night, a small fishing vessel managed to slip out undetected, reaching Zhu Yuanzhang in Nanjing to inform him of the siege of Nanchang. Arriving in Hukou, north of Lake Poyang on August 24, Zhu's fleet came up from behind and successfully relieved the city only 4 days later. Chen Youliang faced Zhu Yuanzhang's fleet with his entire armada on August the 29th. Despite being outnumbered almost 4 to 1, Zhu Yuanzhang's forces unloaded an array of gunpowder weapons, fire bombs, fire guns, fire arrows, fire seeds, fire lances, large and small hand cannons, as well as small iron bombs and rockets. The battle on August 30 even saw Zhu Yuanzhang deploying squadrons equipped with naval trebuchets that hurled firebombs into the enemy fleet, ultimately achieving success by burning the enemy vessels. The use of fire weapons would be a key deciding factor in this large naval encounter. On September 2nd, the fleets engaged once more, with Zhu's smaller and more lighter vessels isolating and destroying Chen Youliang's larger tower warships, compelling them to withdraw to safety. Amidst the withdrawal, Chen Youliang's forces became trapped in a month-long blockade. He attempted to break out on October 4, but Zhu Yuanzhang's strategic use of fire ships scattered and destroyed the enemy fleet, with the fleeing vessels being picked off one by one. During the battle, Chen would meet his demise when he was struck by an arrow, solidifying Zhu Yuanzhang's victory and establishing himself as the preeminent leader of China with no contestant. 5 years later, the Ming would overthrow the Yuan Dynasty, pushing the Mongols back into their original homeland of Outer Mongolia, and Zhu Yuanzhang took his place as emperor of all of China, reclaimed Han rule, and began the Ming Dynasty's long and prosperous rule for the next 300 years. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. These videos take quite a while to make, so if you enjoyed these videos and wanted to ensure the continued production of this educational content, please consider subscribing to my Patreon page. The link is in the description below. Remember to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't done that already, and I'll see you next time.